thanks for coming and joining me again. I hope that wherever in the world you are, you're keeping safe and well. Here in England, we're back in lockdown. This nuisance of a virus just isn't wanting to go away yet. Never mind. I haven't really talked much about the pandemic in my podcasts, have I? I think I mentioned it once in the very first episode. I don't really want to. I don't want to. This is a little bit of time away from it, I hope. But I have to say that I'm really, really lucky. I feel such a lucky person. I have a nice home. I'm not on my own. There's 2 other people live in my household. I have a lovely garden. I have walks that I can go on from my doorstep. I have a job that I do at home. I do it at home anyway, but even when I can't have my piano pupils coming into the house, I can do the lessons online. So I'm really lucky in that way. And another of the ways that I feel really fortunate is just that I love making things. It's one of the best ways of keeping your mind calm and relaxed is to be busy with your hands. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, if you're knitting or crocheting or sewing or making other things or baking. It's just keeping your hands busy is so good for just focusing the mind on something in particular, and usually you're being productive as well, satisfying when you have an end product. But it's such a great thing to be able to do. So I feel lucky that that's something that I like to do, and I find it hard to imagine what it must be like for people who don't keep their hands busy. Well, the time's a funny thing at the moment, isn't it? Feels like we're going slowly and quickly all at the same time. I was watching a podcast a short while ago done by Hey Brownberry, and she described it as fast forward in slow motion. That's what she felt like. Everything was tumbling around, but life had also come to a sort of a standstill because we can't go and do the things that we normally do. So there we go. So in this episode, I am going to show you one of the ways I've been keeping my hands busy, which is something I've done for the first time, some wet felting. And it was a little kit that was very kindly given to me by one of my WI friends. She's moving house, she was having a bit of a sort out, and she does run craft workshops and things, and she had some spare wet felting kits that she wasn't going to be using. So she kindly donated one of them to me, and so I had a go at it, and I had great fun doing it. I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm going to show you some video clips shortly of me making a piece of felt. So I've got that coming, and then also coming up, related to that, is just some video clips of a couple of walks I went on where there are fulling mills, and fulling is something I'll talk about shortly. But so that's really what's in today's episode. So without further ado, let's have a look at my efforts at making felt. So first of all, I'm putting on a waterproof apron and then laying a towel onto the table, which is covered in a waterproof cloth. And then I'm unrolling part of an old bathroom blind. And now I've got the wool roving. I'm just taking strips off it there and then pulling it apart into smaller pieces and laying them slightly overlapping next to each other in a row, a bit like tiles on a roof. And I'm starting another row there, and I've sped this up because it took ages to do this. So there, I've done about 3 rows, and now I'm laying pieces of wool across in the opposite direction, Just small pieces at a time, but all overlapping. There's 3 rows of that, and then another layer of pieces of wool in the same direction as the first layer. I'm placing a piece of netting across it, and then sprinkling it with warm soapy water. It's got washing up liquid mixed into it. Make it nice and wet. It's just an old bottle with holes poked in the top, in the lid. And I'm rolling up the blind. And this is where the hard work began, which I had to do this lots and lots of times, about 100 times. Each time I'd rolled the blind up, I did that backwards and forwards motion about 100 times. A bit more water, or soapy water. And then I unrolled it and carefully peeled off the netting. And then you can see that we've already got a fabric forming. So I've just turned it 90 degrees, put the netting back over it in a bit more soapy water, and rolling up the blind again. Irritate the fibres again, get all those little barbs hooking onto each other. And again, I am turning the felt and giving it another bit of an irritation. Now, just dipping it into water for a bit. I'm going to irritate the fibres a bit more by just hitting it lots of times. This was quite good fun. Just to try and give it as much strength as possible. I rinsed it again and then again in some clean water. Get all the soap out. And here we have my piece of fabric, which I've then put on some kitchen towel to dry. So there we go. I was really pleased with my first ever piece of felt that I made. And I am going to use that to make something, and you'll find that out in another episode. I really want to do some more felting, so I need to acquire some wool roving in some different colours, and I'm looking forward to having another go, producing some more felt. Well, I was telling you that there are lots of lovely walks that I can go on from my doorstep, and one of my favourite walks is through Baxter Wood. And in Baxter Wood there's a river running through, and partway through the woods, on the banks of the river, there's the ruins of an old mill. And it turns out that this was once a fulling mill, owned by the prior of Durham Cathedral, in fact. And fulling was a part of the process of creating woolen cloth. It had 2 parts to it. The first step was cleaning it, and the second step was creating a nice strong cloth. And for many centuries this went on with just human labour. And it was very hard work indeed. The wool was placed into a liquid, usually human urine, and had to be pounded and pounded for many hours, usually with the feet, sometimes with wooden mallets, and eventually creating cloth that could be used. By medieval times, the process started to take place in watermills, which became known as fulling mills. And they also started sometimes to use a clay-like substance called fuller's earth for the cleansing process. And then the mechanism of the mill would do all of the hard work in pounding the woolen the bits of wool in there. And if you look at wool fibres under a microscope, you'll see it has lots of tiny little barbs on it, really. And when you place the wool in liquid and pound it, these little barbs all cling to each other, and the more that you pound it, the stronger the fabric becomes, and we end up with what is actually felt. So you'll see in a moment some video clips that I took of the ruins of the mill in Baxter Wood, and that was in use in the 15th and 16th centuries. But in fact, you'll also see some video after that of the fulling mill that still stands in the middle of Durham, in the middle of the city, just below the cathedral, right down on the banks of the river, obviously, because it was a water mill. And there have been fulling mills down on the river in the middle of Durham since the 12th century. This one that's still standing has been there since the 15th century, and it was owned by the Bishop of Durham and later by the Prior of Durham, I think. And yes, and it was in use. It was in use until 1833. After that, the university took it over, and it became the first university museum. So there we go. It was a museum of mostly natural history and some other things, historical artefacts. A few years later, a few decades after that, the university abandoned it because it just got flooded too often. It wasn't a good place for keeping museum artefacts. But in fact, it was started to be used again by the university in 1975 as the archaeology museum and as a teaching place for the archaeology students and for school children as well. And yeah, that was focused entirely on archaeology, and it was there until just quite recently. In fact, the archaeology museum has now moved out of the fulling mill and into a lovely new gallery up on Palace Green. I think that happened in 2014, and it's up by the cathedral. It's much more accessible and it's really great. Excellent place to visit if you come to Durham anyway. Very interesting indeed. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy seeing the video clips of the ruins of the old mill in Baxter Wood and then of the mill that's there in Durham now. That's all from me for today, and I hope you've enjoyed it and that you'd like to come back. If you haven't already done so, perhaps you could click on subscribe, and apparently there's a little bell you can, I've just learned about this, a little bell you can tap on as well, click on, which will give you notifications of when there's a new podcast out. If you like the video, click on the thumb, and I would love for you to comment as well. So, please do comment, ask me anything, or just say hello. That would be really nice. But until we meet again, just keep safe, keep well, and keep those hands busy. Okay, so that's all for now. Bye.